Before we begin, let me ask you something. What would you do if the place you trusted most suddenly broke into one way no system ever planned for? If the alarms stayed silent, the sensors looked away, and the only warning was a faint shiver beneath your feet, too small for anyone else to feel. This is the story of a man who heard that shiver. A quiet maintenance deck no one thought about, a crack the models dismissed, and a choice between numbers and human lives when every second counted. If you think a peaceful space colony can't turn into a battlefield in under a minute, keep listening. By the time you reach the end, you may see everyday life, your life, very differently. Now, let's step onto Deck 12 and pay attention to the floor. Because it's about to move. The ring pretended the war was over. Deck 12 was where people tried hardest to believe it. Artificial dawn was still hours away. The overhead lamps hung in a deep blue dusk, just bright enough for safety. Hydroponic vines climbed silver trellises along the inner curve of the habitat. Tiny droplets glimmered on the leaves as the misters cycled. The track ran in a smooth arc under Rion Kale's boots. It followed the curve of the Asterix habitat ring, a band of rubber and composite above the planted beds. On the outside, Gethern 4 turned slowly, a gas giant the color of bruised glass. On the inside, gravity came from the steady spin of the station around its spine. Rion pushed the wide head of the cleaning pad along the inner rail. The pad whispered against the floor, catching grit, dried nutrients, stray bits of leaf. He moved in short strokes, careful not to leave streaks. The habit came from another life, another kind of floor. A faint vibration tickled the soles of his feet. He paused and let the pad rest. The hum of air, movers filled the quiet. Cool air brushed his cheek from a vent above his shoulder. The vibration came again. It rose through the rail and up into his arms. Felt like a pulse through metal bones. He had felt that same kind of pulse under dropship benches long ago. Rion looked up at the ceiling panels. Nothing shook. The vines did not tremble. The small status strip above the emergency door still glowed a patient green. He checked the time on his wristband. 2 hours into the night shift. 12 more decks to inspect before his run was done. 12 more chances to listen for the wrong kind of silence. Some nights, he thought the station sounded exactly right. Bands rolled, pumps thumped. The spin murmur sat like a low note under every breath. Other nights, like this one, something in the rhythm felt half a step off. The numbers on the consoles would still sit in their proper ranges. The graphs would show acceptable tolerance. The body knew different things than the graphs. He pushed the pad again and worked his way past the first curve. The track opened onto a long stretch beside the main hydroponic bay. Rows of low bushes grew in stacked trays, lit from below by soft white strips. Someone had left a discarded drink pouch on the railing. He caught it in one smooth motion. He crushed it flat and slid it into collection pocket on the pad. His hands moved on their own. His eyes kept flicking up to the ceiling, joints and the seams in the curved wall. It had been many years since his last combat drop. Whole shifts went by without anyone saying the name Hylian drop cores. New recruits on the station only knew that name from archived footage. To them, war was something that happened to other people in old recordings. Rion had decided he preferred it that way. Not having to explain every scar was a kind of peace. He paused at a junction where the track narrowed. A bank of exposed piping ran along the wall there. Silver conduits held reclaimed water, air mix, and nutrient slurry. Small tags along the line carried color codes and tiny printed warnings. He set the pad upright and rested a hand on the closest pipe. Warm? The right kind of warm? He listened again. The ring kept turning. Deck 12 breathed. With the rest of Astro fans, pumps, the low thrum of spin, nothing screamed wrong in any obvious way. He let out a slow breath. Some nights living meant nothing more than cleaning and walking in circles. Some nights that was still a victory. Footsteps slapped. The track behind him, light, quick, uneven. He did not have to turn to know who owned them. "You are late, Toma," Rion said. His voice stayed low, so it did not bounce off the curve too hard. The boy skidded to a stop beside him. Tomarel was tall for his age, all joints and angles. His hair stuck up in damp spikes from sweat. His breath came in fast bursts. "Sorry," Thomas said. Dock Spine West ran a drill. They would not let us out until the alarms cleared. "Did you time your run here?" Rian asked. "Or did you just sprint until you felt like dying?" Toma grinned, despite his breathing. "A bit of both." Rian pointed at the track. "Good. You can die on the floor. We will practice falling first." Toma groaned. "Again? Really? I already know how gravity works." "Show me," Rian said. "Fall wrong. Break something. Convince me." He set the cleaning pad aside and stepped onto the track. A faint scuff marked the place where last night's drill had ended. He pointed at the line. "Start here," he said. "Run to me. When I raise my hand, you cut your feet and go down. Remember the rules." Toma rolled his eyes. "Chin down, arms in, twist to the side. Do not catch myself." With a locked elbow. "Yes. I remember. You remember." "In your mouth," Rian said. "I want your legs to remember." "Move." Toma trotted back to the start mark. He shook his arms out and took 2 quick breaths. Then he came forward, feet drumming lightly on the track. At 3 long strides, Rian lifted his hand. Toma tried to turn his fall into a kind of clumsy roll. He tilted his head at the last second and hit the floor a little too hard on one knee. Rian reached him in 2 steps and tapped the side of the boy's helmet. The helmet was an old exercise, shell scratched but functional. "That knee was yours," Rian said. "In a real drop you would carry that pain for the whole run." Again, Toma sucked in air through his teeth. He keeps saying, "real drop." We are on a habitat. The biggest fall I get is down a flight of stairs. Rian nodded at the overhead. "All these decks are stairs. If the pressure leaves first." Again, they did it 3 more times. On the 4th try, Toma's body finally gave up trying to look graceful. He simply cut his stride, dropped his center, and let the track take his weight in a smooth slide. He slapped his forearms down at the right angle. He turned his cheek to the floor so his faceplate would not crack. He ended with feet pointing toward the invisible threat. Rian knelt and tapped the helmet again. "Better," he said. "Now we can start teaching you not to fall there at all." Toma lay on the ground and let his laughter bounce up to the ceiling. "For a maintenance janitor," he said, "you are very bad at being boring." Rian pushed himself to his feet. "Get up," he said. "We are not done. We have not even tied you to anything yet." He led the boy to a recessed panel in the wall. 2 orange hooks sat beside a coiled rappel line R42. Above them, a glow strip framed a simple sign. "Read it," Rian said. Toma squinted. "Anchor point for emergency. Maneuver in reduced gravity. Use certified harness." Only Rian nodded. "Now, show me how you would clip in if the floor started to tilt and the rail moved away from you." Toma hesitated. He reached for the line and fumbled with the clip. His hands were used to gamepads, not carabiner. Rian watched without speaking. The boy got the clip on the wrong part of the anchor twice before it finally sat right. "You think the Civic Rapid Response Corps will give you time to read the instructions?" Rian asked. Toma flushed. "I am not in the Corps," he muttered. "Not yet, everyone is in something," Rian said. "Sometimes the thing is just a deck with plants and a few hundred people on it. You clip wrong here, someone drops past you and does not stop." Toma looked down at his hands. "I thought you were just making up drills to mess with me. I am too old to waste my time that way," Rian said. "I mess with you so you do not die, stupid. There is a difference." A soft chime sounded from the wall console beside the anchor. A small line of text scrolled up the panel. "Strain node S-level sensor cluster D. Variance plus 1.7 beyond baseline. Status within acceptable range. No action required." Rian stepped closer. He scanned the list of recent readings. Numbers flickered, half translucent, over the standard gravity readout. The variance line had been flat earlier in the week. Now it showed a slow, steady creep. "Problem?" Toma asked. "Not yet," Rian said. "Just a number that does not like where it is heading." He flicked a finger along the bottom of the display. The station's AI sent back a polite flag. Variance noted. Cluster marked 4. Low priority review. Estimated service, window 14 days. 14 days might as well have been for years in station terms. There was always somewhere more important than Deck 12. He saved the snapshot to his wristband. The band pinged once. He would copy it into Kale's structural logbook later. Boots clicked on metal behind them. These steps were not light. They matched each other like arguments in a row. Rian turned as Holt Garin walked into view. The station security chief wore his uniform zipped to the throat. A dark band circled his arm, carrying the crest of Asterix Central Operations Board. Holt's eyes flicked from Rian to Toma and back. "You are off your scheduled route, Kale," Holt said. "Track alignment is not on your checklist. This hour, pipe junction is," Rian said. He nodded at the exposed run behind him. "While I am here, I'll watch other things breathe." Holt's jaw tightened. "Central Ops flagged that variance already," he said. "VIGILT logged it as noise. We are in high traffic. Around Dock Spine West, minor flex is normal. Normal is relative," Rian said. "Relative to how long you plan to keep this ring." Spinning Toma shifted his weight from one foot to the other. His earlier grin had faded. He watched Holt like a student watching a headmaster. "I am sure your long service gives you strong opinions," Holt said, "but scared residents make sloppy You start telling people the deck is bending under them, you make my job harder." "I am telling one boy how not to break his head," Rian said. "I have not shouted fire in the gardens." Holt glanced at the rappel line R42 hanging from the anchor. "Off hours," he said. "No scheduled drill. You log this as training and maintenance will push back on your hours. Again, that line is rated to save 12 people," Rian said. "Using it for one boy now is cheaper than 12 broken necks later." Holt ignored the comment. "Central Operations Board approved a resource shift this week," he said. "Dock Spine West gets priority. Maintenance for the next quarter. Deck 12 will drop to a reduced schedule." Rian felt that faint vibration again under his boots. Or maybe it was just his pulse getting louder. "Reduced," he repeated. "Routine cleaning and minor checks only," Holt said. "Major structural reviews every second cycle instead of every cycle. You will log your time accordingly." Toma opened his mouth, then closed it again. His fingers twisted the edge of his helmet strap. Rian looked past Holt, at the curve of the deck. A woman jogged slowly along the far side, headphones on, eyes half closed. A child in bare feet tiptoed along the garden border, hands out to feel the leaves. "This deck carries 300 people on a busy shift," Rian said. "Flexes every time someone laughs or runs. You cut the ears that listen to it, you will miss." When it starts to cry, Holt's voice stayed smooth. "VIGILT hears more than you ever will. There is a real issue. The system will tell us. Until then, you follow your checklist. You do not expand it because you feel nostalgic. For old battles, the words landed like a slap." Rian did not flinch. "I follow the list," he said. "I also listen to the floor. You can write me up for that if it helps your spreadsheet." Holt regarded him for a long second. Then he tapped his slate. "No write-up today," Holt said. "Just a reminder, stay in your lane, Kale. And keep your war stories off the track." He turned and walked away, boots ticking in perfect rhythm. The hum of the ring filled the space he left. Toma let out a breath he had been holding. "Is he always like that?" Toma asked. "Yes," Rian said. "He thinks if the numbers look good, the people will too." Put the line back on its hook. Toma clipped rappel line R42 back onto the anchor point. His fingers were steadier this time. "Same time next shift?" the boy asked. "If you are on time," Rian said. "I might even let you fall less." Toma laughed and trotted off along the track. His steps grew fainter as he rounded the curve. The night settled around Deck 12 again. Rian picked up the cleaning pad and resumed his slow walk along the inner rail. The ring kept turning. Gravity stayed faithful. The air tasted the way scrubbed air always did. He finished the circuit of the deck and stopped at a service alcove. A small console sat there, built into the wall like an afterthought. He palmed it awake. His report form appeared without flourish. He dictated the variance, reading the time, the exact location of strain node cluster D. He tagged the entry under minor structural anomaly. The system accepted his words and fed them to the queue. A small line at the bottom showed position. Hundreds of tasks sat above. His in quiet, patient lines. He saved a copy too, his wristband anyway. Later, in his bunk, he would write it, by hand, into Cale's structural logbook. Paper did not crash. Ink did not reorder itself. To match budget targets, he closed the console and stepped back onto the track. As he turned, his eyes caught a small glow above the service door. A single indicator light had shifted. From steady green to a soft amber, it blinked once, paused, blinked again. The reflection of that little light painted a tiny circle on the floor. For a moment, Rian saw not a door on Deck 12, but a hatch on a dropship. A hatch that had once blinked that same uncertain color before all the alarms came at once. The amber light steadied, then it slipped back to green, as if it had changed its mind. Overhead, the announcement chime. 4 shift change rang through the deck. New crew would come soon. With fresh shoes and tired smiles, the ring would keep turning, around Gethrin like it always had. For the scheduler, another night shift had ended on time. For Rian Kale, it felt like the pause, between one battle and the echo of the last. The ring brightened by degrees. Artificial morning touched the inner curve of Deck 12 like a slow tide of pale gold. The overhead strips warmed from blue to soft amber. Hydroponic leaves drank the light in shimmering waves. People filled the deck almost at once. Joggers traced the arc of the track, shoes tapping in smooth rhythm. Children darted between planter rows, chasing each other through columns of mist. Vendors rolled open their shutters at the far end, letting the scent of warm-grained bars drift through the air. Rian Kale paused near the rail and watched. The crowd settled into its morning tempo. Life on Deck 12 always looked peaceful from a few steps back. It sounded like breath and laughter and the easy pulse of a habitat that believed it was safe. He wiped moisture from a wall panel and glanced upward. Above Deck 12, through a sliver of transparent flooring installed months ago, he could see glints of fresh plating. The construction crews were busy, with upgrades for the commercial tiers, new lighting, new insulation, new sensor arrays, all paid for, all ahead of schedule. Down here, the surface of the curved wall still showed the faint scarring of old stress marks. No one had repainted. Those in 3 cycles. Tomarel jogged toward him, hair bouncing, steps still to light for proper control. He slowed when he reached Rian. "You are early," Thomas said. He pointed at the cleaning kit leaning against the wall. "You did not sleep." Again Rian shrugged. "Sleep is cooperative. Some nights it works. Some it does not." Before Toma could answer, a chime echoed across the deck. A voice followed, smooth, official, practiced. "Attention residents. Maintenance schedule, revision, effective immediately. Deck 12. Structural checks moved to a reduced cycle." Toma blinked at Rian. "That sounds bad," he whispered. Rian said nothing. He already knew who was on his way. Holt Garin arrived with the same measured stride he used on night shift. His uniform reflected the new morning light in crisp lines. 2 assistants trailed him, each carrying slates. Kale, Holt said. "What a coincidence. You are exactly the person I expected to see under this announcement." Rian set the cleaning wand aside. "We do not have coincidences. On a rotating ring," he said, "we have timing." Holt tapped his slate and zoomed in on a schematic. "Central Ops has reviewed the strain data. Deck 12 remains stable. Noise and sensors is consistent with increased foot traffic during peak hours." Rian's jaw flexed. "Noise is not creep. Noise does not build. These readings do, within tolerance," Holt replied. "Not critical. Not important enough to divert resources from trade sectors. You keep calling it not important," Rian said. "You realize 300 people use this deck every shift." Holt lifted one hand, as if calming a restless crowd. "Statistically, decks of this class fail in less than 0.01% of operational hours. And we are far above that. Safety margin?" Toma frowned. "People are not statistics." Holt looked at the boy, surprised he spoke. "And children should not interrupt operations discussions." Rian stepped forward. "Deck 12 breathes different than the rest of the ring. You do not hear it because you are not here long enough to listen." "I listen to VIGILT," Holt said, "and Vigilty. listens to everything, including emotional noise. His assistants typed without looking up. Holt turned away. Reduced schedule stands, he said over his shoulder. Minor issues only. Let the system do its job, Rian. Watched him disappear around the curve. The deck felt quieter after he left, even with all the people still moving through it. Toma cleared his throat. So, what now? Now, Rian said, we practice something useful. He guided Toma toward the emergency alcove near the garden. This one held a backup helmet rack, two pressure hoods, and an auxiliary rappel line, R-42. Toma sighed dramatically. We did this already, not with people running all around us, Rian said. You learn better when the world is noisy. He lifted a pressure hood and pulled it over Toma's head. Seal it, Rian said. First time. No hesitating. Toma fumbled with the collar ring, twisting until it hissed into place. He exhaled in relief. Now simulate low pressure. Untapped a button on the alcove panel. The hood tightened, slightly around Toma's jaw. Toma's eyes widened. Hey, you could warn me. No, Rian said. You do not get warnings. You get seconds. If air thins, your hands must move before your thoughts catch up. Toma muttered something inside the hood. Rian pointed to the exit markers, stenciled along the curved wall. Follow them. Touch every marker. Then come back. Toma started walking. People glanced at him and smiled, some amused, some confused. To them, he probably looked like a boy playing rescue drills. When Toma finished the circuit, Rian handed him the rappel line. Clip in, he said. Toma rolled his eyes, but did it. Faster this time. Cleaner? Rian nodded. Good. Now imagine the deck tilts, your stomach drops. The rail moves a full arm's length away. How do you move? Toma swallowed. Fast. Wrong, Rian said. You move stable. You move like gravity is still your friend, even when it is trying to shake you off. Toma hesitated. You sound like you have done this before. Rian looked past him for a moment, seeing another deck, another day. There was a drop, he said. We were supposed to land on a platform bolted to a mining beam. Pilot said sensors looked clean. The beam had hairline cracks from an old meteor graze. Warning lights blinked, early, then went dark, too soon. 2 minutes soon, Toma stood still. The hood's visor reflected the soft lights above them. What happened? He asked. We fell through, Rian said. 3 of us lived. Only because one person remembered a drill no one else cared about. The boy's voice softened. That is not the point, Rian said. The point is drills look boring until they do not. A pair of construction drones buzzed overhead toward the commercial tiers. New plating gleamed, polished, and perfect as they passed. Deck 12's older panels looked dull by comparison. The alcove panel blinked. A quiet alert scrolled up in small letters. Strain node, a swivel sensor, cluster F. Variance plus 2.1. Status, disregard. Autofilter applied. Toma looked at it. What does that mean? It means the system got tired of hearing the truth, Rian said. And it decided to call it noise. Again he tapped the panel gently. The metal felt different than last night. A longer echo, a deeper tone. Not wrong yet, but not right either. Toma unsealed the hood. Why are we the only ones who care? Most people do not hear what the deck says, Rian replied. They hear the numbers. Numbers are easier. The day moved on. Crowds shifted. Children went to classes. Vendors sold meals and packed away their carts. When the shift dimmed to evening colors, Rian finished the last of his cleaning route. He made one more quiet lap around the deck, stopping at each sensor panel in turn. One by one, their variance readings crept upward, not by much, but by enough for someone who watched for patterns. He stopped at a maintenance alcove and opened a private log screen. He entered each variance line manually. He listed the hour, the location, the noise pattern, the change. He saved a copy to his wristband, and then to Kale's structural logbook. The screen dimmed as the deck lights lowered. People headed home. Footsteps thinned. Rian stood alone on the quiet curve of Deck 12. Another day had passed, almost identical to the one before it, except the numbers were not identical anymore. They had drifted only slightly, but every drift had a direction. He closed the alcove, touched a warm metal panel once, and let out a long breath. The ring kept turning around Geth, but something beneath his boots felt a fraction too tired tonight. He tightened his grip on the logbook. If no one else listened yet, he would. Every vibration, every shift, every quiet warning, a new page waited for him. A new entry, a new line in a story he hoped he would never have to tell again. And so, in the dim breathing dusk of Deck 12, Rian Kale began writing his next day of war in a place that claimed it no longer had any. The afternoon on Deck 12 started like any other quiet mercy. Light panels eased from white into a warm amber tone. Shadows from the hydroponic trellises stretched longer across the curve. Half the deck moved at a lazy pace. Families walked to the inner ring. Workers from maintenance Tier 4 strolled with bowls of steaming food. Children chased each other in short bursts, feet slapping the track, voices bouncing off the vaulted ceiling. Out beyond the glass, Gethrin 4 rolled under Asterix's habitat ring. Its storm bands turned in slow swirls of violet and gray, like bruises against black. Inside, gravity felt steady and kind. Rian Kale checked the time on his wristband and started his run. His joints crackled. Once, then settled. He chose a pace just above a walk, enough to make his breath deepen, not enough to distract his ears. Tomarel trotted to catch up. He fell into step on Rian's right side. Shoes a little too loud, stride a little too short. This feels better than morning drills, Toma said. At least there are people. Morning was just us and the plants. People make more noise than plants, Rian said. Noise is useful. He meant it. Healthy noise hid trouble until you learned how to separate one from the other. That had been true on Drop. Ships, and it stayed true on Habitats. They passed the panel where he had watched the variants climb over the last few days. He laid 2 fingers against the wall as they ran by. Metal carried history into his bones. Anything? Toma asked. Rian listened. The vibration under his fingers felt a little harsh, like a note played too hard on a string. Not broken. Not yet. Keep running, he said. One more lap before we change games. Toma grinned and pushed his speed. Race you, Rian. Let him pull ahead. He did not need to win. He needed to measure how quickly Toma tired and how well he kept his feet when that happened. They circled past the wide viewing strip again. From here, Gethrin 4 filled half the sky. Light from the gas giant spilled strange colors into the deck, painting faces in pale blue and bruised purple. High above the hull, unseen by any eye on Deck 12A, a fragment of metal less than a finger wide tumbled through vacuum. It had once been part of a cargo shroud. Now, it was just one more piece of orbital debris in a crowded lane. On its 12th pass around Asterix, its orbit intersected the ring at a shallow angle. There was no warning, flash, no dramatic trail. It struck the outer support skin above Deck 12 at several kilometers per second. Energy had to go somewhere. The thin outer plating dented, then tore. Shockwaves funneled into the heavier structural ribs of the ring. At fracture zone D17, where decades of spin and microstress had already drawn microlines in the alloy, the new force arrived like a final question. The metal answered with a sound too small for most ears, a dry, internal click. Inside Deck 12, Rian heard something, not with his inner ear, not yet. With his feet, the track vibrated once, the tone of the deck dropped, as if a string had loosened by a fraction. He slowed. Toma glanced back. Problem? Toma asked. Maybe, Rian said. Shorten your stride. Listen while you move. All along the deck, strain node S level. Sensors sent their readings into the veins of the station's nervous system. Graphs shifted by tiny increments. Lines that had once moved in flat, patient noise now bent upward, showing slow growth in stress. VIGILT received the data. The AI compared the pattern against its library. Most similar sequences came from thermal fluctuations, power surges, minor missile. Only a handful belonged to real structural emergencies. Probability tables unfolded inside Vigil T's core. 99 times out of 100, this pattern meant nothing serious. The AI assigned it a low priority label and tucked it under a Q marked later. On Deck 12, air found new paths through the widening microcracks. It slipped past ceiling layers and baffles, hissing softly into spaces where it never should have gone. The temperature dropped by by less than 1 degree. The human body was a poor thermometer. No one flinched at that small change. Rian felt the hairs on his arms rise. The back of his neck prickled. "Another lap," he said. "Then we play the other game." "What game?" Toma asked. "The one where the floor moves and we still choose where we land," Rian said. They ran. Children laughed. Somewhere, a vendor at the far end of the deck argued cheerfully with a customer about spice levels in a bowl of stew. The deck behaved itself for another minute. 2, 3. Then the ceiling gave a warning. The first audible crack was not loud. It sounded like a knuckle popping, magnified by the curvature of the dome. Several people looked up at once. A thin, pale line appeared across one of the reinforced panels near the center of the deck. It ran from the base of one support rib to another, drawn by forces older than any of them. "Is that normal?" a woman asked. Her child tugged at her hand. "I heard something," the child said. It sounded wrong. Before she could answer, the local warning lights came on. Slim rings of amber light ignited all around fracture zone D17, tracing a circle on the floor under the damaged panel. The overhead voice spoke in its calm first stage tone. "Local stability deviation. Please clear the marked area." "Repeat. Clear the marked area." For heartbeat, no one moved. Warnings on stations were like car alarms in old cities. They went off often enough for people to doubt them. Rian did not doubt. "Off the track," he shouted. "In a wall. Move." He grabbed Tomas' sleeve and pulled him sideways. Then came the second sound. The panel did not explode. It surrendered. A jagged crack leaped across its surface. The outer layers fractured into thousands of shards. They flew not straight down but sideways, carried by the rotation of the ring. Sharp fragments scythed through the air. They cut a clean line through nothing, shredding mist and light. One struck a lamp, and the lamp burst in a shower of sparks. Pressure inside Deck 12 dropped another small step. This time, lungs noticed. Ears popped. A cold wind rose from nowhere, blowing away from the fracture. People screamed. Someone fell. Someone else started to run toward the nearest exit at a full, blind sprint. Rian Kale had been in enough collapses to recognize the front edge of a stampede. "Do not run at the gate," he shouted. "Move along the wall. Give it space." No one listened at first. Panic did not understand language. A deeper siren rolled through the deck. This one spoke with fewer words. "Pressure loss detected. Emergency segmentation engaging. All residents evacuate Deck 12." All along the curve Moxivan, emergency segmentation gates began to descend from recesses in the ceiling. Heavy slabs of composite metal slid down toward the floor, dividing the deck into sealed sections. Gate Kilo 3 started its drop directly between the largest crowd and the nearest main exit. Halfway down, it stopped. One of the guide rails had twisted when the frame shifted under stress. The gate ground into the bent track and stuck there, teeth bared at chest height. Wind roared through the gap beneath it. The gate became a funnel, focusing the escaping air into a violent, narrow stream. Toma turned at the sound. The circle of warning light from fracture Zone D17 reached almost to his feet. 4 children huddled near him, eyes wide, mouths open. Rian saw them all at once. The stuck gate, the fracture overhead. The children rooted to the spot. The main exit, far beyond what they could reach before the system finished what it had started. "Toma!" Rian shouted. His voice shredded. On the rising wind, Toma did not move. Fear pinned him to the track. Rian sucked in cold air and forced his tone sharp. "Toma, look at me." The boy's head snapped toward him. For an instant, the noise dropped, as if the deck held its breath. "Remember your drills," Rian yelled. "Not a game now." "Same rules." Something clicked behind Toma's eyes. He reached for his pack with hands that suddenly knew what they were doing. He pulled out his compact hood and the spare. He slammed the spare onto the smallest child's head, twisted the collar ring until it sealed with a hiss. "Breathe slow," he shouted into the child's face. "Count to 3 on every breath. Stay down." He threw his own hood over his head and locked it. His voice came out muffled now, but louder inside the local channel. "Everyone get low," he said. "Hands in. Do not grab the rail. Look at the floor, not at the ceiling. A shard of composite knifed through the air and struck the track where he had stood a second earlier. It skipped and spun away, toward the outer pushed curve. Through motion deliberate. He shoved people away from Kilo 3, toward a different gate, whose tracks still ran straight. He pointed with his whole arm, giving them a clear line. Exit is that way, he called. This gate is jammed. Move sideways, not forward. Do it now. Panic. Tried to surge again. He cut it off with physical contact, not force, just solid weight. A hand on a shoulder, a shove. At a hip, a twist at an elbow. He changed their direction by making it easier to go where they needed to be. The floor pitched very slightly as the ring's control system fought to keep spin stable despite the sudden mass and pressure shifts. Most people did not understand why. They felt as if the deck were breathing. They only knew they wanted off. On the other side of the jammed gate, Toma hustled children toward a smaller door set into the inner wall. The frame around it carried the yellow, diagonal marks of a service access. He remembered Rihan's voice from quieter nights. He remembered the rule about not trusting only the obvious doors. That one, he said. Follow me. Hands on my back. Do not look up. The wind pushed at them, sucking at clothes, dragging at their legs. Each child fought the invisible, hand-tugging them toward the fracture. Toma widened his stance the way Rihan had drilled into his muscles. He moved each foot like it mattered. Because now, it did. Almost there, he said. His own voice sounded strange inside the hood. Thin. Too high. At the control level of Asterix, far above Deck 12, VIGILT's warning cues had finally climbed out of the noise. Pressure drop graphs and structural deviation. Lines crossed thresholds no filter could ignore. Red overlays crawled across the schematic of the ring. Deck 12 glowed like a wound. Holt Garen stood over the projection table. His jaw was tight, his eyes moving fast as models updated. If we do not isolate it now, a systems tech said, we risk loss of Deck 11 and 13 as well. The load is shifting across the ribs. How many people are still on 12? Holt asked. Estimate 130, the tech said. Counting those in service corridors, and how many we lose if we let this propagate, Holt said. The tech swallowed. Thousands, Vigilante proposed. 3 main options in a neutral text block. All 3 involved locking the mark-saving gates. Only one locked them partially. The casualty projections rose and fell like a bad tide. Holt stared at the numbers. He had seen worse tables on worse days, back when Asterix was still being claimed as a safe investment. He pointed at the option that saved the most green dots on the model. Full containment, he said. Lock all mark-saving gates on 12. Now, the tech hesitated. We still have people on the wrong side of Kilo 3, she said. Reports from local sensors show movement near the fracture. Holt did not look away from the map. We accept local loss too. Prevent systemic failure, he said. That is the point of bulkheads. Lock them. Commands went out across the internal network. Gate motors received new orders. The jammed Kilo 3 wind, as fresh, torque pressed down on damaged rails. On Deck 12, the gate shuddered. Metal screamed under stress. It ground downward another few centimeters, throwing off a spray of flakes where it scraped the bent track. Rihan felt the movement in his shoulders. He threw his weight against the gate without thinking. Cold metal bit into his palms. He might as well have tried to hold back a glacier with his bare hands. The motor pushed with more force than one man could answer. Rihan hit his wrist. Band with an elbow. Kale to Central, he said. His voice came out raw. Do not close this gate. Repeat. Do not close. We still have civilians in the fracture zone. VIGILT answered first. Containment priority is ring integrity. Please proceed to the nearest safe exit. I am not asking for directions, Rihan snapped. I am telling you there are children on the wrong side of your neat line. There was a short pause. Machine time inside. That pause ran long. Holt cut VIGILT off the channel and spoke himself. This is Central, he said. We have full visual. We cannot risk this spread. Close to isolate. That is the only way you close this gate, Rihan said, and you are not isolating a leak. You were sealing a grave. Give me 20 seconds. You had time, Holt said. Everyone had the same time. The longer we wait, the worse the stress gets. You know this? You served. You understand acceptable loss on a battlefield. People choose to stand there, Rian said. These are kids on a running track. The gate shoved down another notch. Rian's arms shook. He saw Toma reach the service. Door with the yellow stripes. Open it, Rian shouted. Inside and sealed, Toma slammed his palm against the manual release. The door jerked, stuck, then popped open a hand's width. He forced it wider with his shoulder and pushed the children through one by one. Their small bodies vanished. Into the narrow passage, the last child stumbled, almost falling. Toma hooked a hand under their arm and hauled them inside. He took one last look back at the wide curve of Deck 12 at the sealed suits. In the scattering crowd and a single man trying to hold up a gate built for machinery. Then he ducked into the passage and pulled the door shut. The latch clanged. A small green light glowed steady beside it. Rian let out a breath he had not realized he was holding. Relief hit harder than the cold. All right, he said, into the come. Now, you can have your damn gate. Holt's voice came back, clipped. Gate closing, he said. The motors took the last decision as a blessing. Kilo 3 slammed down with a heavy finality that shook dust from the ceiling joints. The roaring wind cut off. What remained was the groan of strained metal and the ragged sound of human breathing. Rian staggered back from the gate. His palms were raw where the edge had eaten through skin. Thin lines of blood mixed with sweat on his fingers. On the sealed side, the fracture still gaped overhead. Panels shifted with tiny, menacing creaks. Frost flowers spread along the edges of exposed metal where escaping air had frozen. The bulkheads around Deck 12 had done their job. The ring would survive this wound. Rian stared at the blank, metal face of Kilo 3. Somewhere behind steel and algorithms, Holt Garin stood in a clean control room, surrounded by numbers that told him he had made the right call. Time did not feel like something measured in seconds here. Each breath stretched long, full of calculations no system would ever write down. Rian pressed his bleeding hand against the cold gate and closed his eyes for one steadying heartbeat. He had saved the children. Holt had saved the ring. No one would write the report that way. The silence after the gate slammed down was almost obscene. It came with weight. With the taste of metal and cold on Rian Kale's tongue, he stood with one hand still pressed to gate Kilo 3, breathing hard, ears ringing from the sudden end of the wind. On this side of the bulkhead, Deck 12 felt smaller, the air thinner, as if the ring itself were exhaling slowly and not quite drawing breath back in. Sela, he said, into his wristband. Talk to me. The channel crackled, then settled. Sela Marin's voice came through, tight but steady. I have you on biofeed, she said. Heart rate is a mess. Kale, I'm going to pretend that's just your winning personality. Rian closed his eyes for a second. The familiar sarcasm let his shoulders drop a fraction. Status on the kids, he said. Local readers show for small signatures and one adolescent inside service corridor 12-4, Sela said. Pressure is low, but holding. Oxygen is thin, but not catastrophic. They're alive. Rian let his hand slide down the gate. Blood smeared the metal. He flexed his fingers and forced them to work. Then, this isn't over, he said. Where's the nearest path from my side to theirs? You enjoy complicated questions, Sela muttered. Hold on, he heard her, fingers flying over a console. Medical post Delta 12 doubled as a minor monitoring station for this section of the ring. She had access to more than bandages and sedatives. Okay, she said, you're in segmentation. Sector D, breach side. The service corridor they're in runs parallel to the main bulkhead line, one deck half-step inboard. There's an old maintenance trunk between you and them. Helion days, pre-upgrade still mapped, Rian asked. Barely, she said. Officially decommissioned. But the access node is still on the schematic. You see a maintenance ladder too. Bulkhead panels to your right. Rian turned. The emergency lights painted everything in shades of red and shadow. Dust floated in the air, caught in thin beams of backup lamps. 2 panels down, he saw a square outline in the wall, waist high, with an old-style mechanical latch. No glowing touchpad, no voice prompt, just metal. I see it, he said. That's your door, Sela said. If it's not rusted, shut in metal. Doesn't rust out here, Rian said. It just forgets it was meant to move. He crossed the deck, boots crunching on small shards of composite. The ceiling above creaked a warning as stress redistributed along wounded ribs. At Medical Post Delta 12, Sela looked up at her ceiling, reflexively, even though she knew the forces didn't move that way. The mind asked for symbols, the body obliged. She flipped the channel open to the dequiet intercom. This is Sila Marin. At Delta 12 she said, if you can hear me and you are not already at an exit, move toward inner walls and check for anyone injured. If you are able-bodied, stay with them. We are building a relay. You are the first links. She heard her own voice echo back faintly from the corridor outside. Someone shouted a reply she couldn't make out. It didn't matter. If even a handful listened, it was enough to start. On the wounded side of Kilo 3, Rhea unwrapped his hand around the maintenance latch and pulled. Nothing happened. He set his jaw, changed his grip, and twisted, putting the strength of his shoulders into it. The latch fought him for a moment, then yielded with a scraping protest. Still moves, he muttered. He dragged the panel open. Cold air rolled out, sharper than the deck behind him. A narrow shaft descended at a steep angle, lit only by the faint blue of emergency strips half buried under dust. Pressure reading, he asked. Sela glanced at the little patch of screen tracking his vitals and suit sensors. Lower than you're breathing now, she said. Not vacuum. You'll feel it when you get halfway. Don't sprint. I'm not the one who forgets how to walk, Rian said. Tell that to your knees later, she said. Kel, you don't have to go alone. There are other responders on the way. They'll hit closed gates and confused algorithms, Rian said. I still remember where the ring hit its bones. I'll get there faster. He swung his legs into the shaft and started down the ladder. Each rung vibrated under his boots, humming with the distant spinning of astro. Above him, he heard another, deeper, rumble as more bulkheads locked into place. The ring was sealing its wounds, layer by layer, ignorant of who still crawled through its veins. Central is tightening. Lockdown, Sela said into his ear. Holt just pushed full compartmentalization. On the maintenance levels, he wants everything between 11 and 13. Frozen, except core transit. Of course he does, Rian said. His charts must look very clean right now. He thinks if he strangles the corridors, nothing else can go wrong, Sela said. Nothing else can move, Rian said. There's a difference. It reached the bottom of the shaft. A narrow tunnel stretched away, low enough that he had to crouch. Old insulation panels lined the walls, some sagging, some missing, exposing wiring and conduit underneath. Air's thin, he said. Words left his mouth less easily. His chest tightened to keep up. Euro saturation's dropping, Sela said. Short sentences. Slow steps, he obeyed. Without argument. He learned that lesson a long time ago. In thin air, pride costs more oxygen than it was worth. Talk to me about the corridor, he said. Service corridor 12-4 runs parallel to you, Sela said. It was never meant for crowds. It's narrow, one person, width in places. The structure flexes again, you could see sections, shift a few centimeters, enough to pin a leg, he said. Enough to pin worse, she said. She toggled another channel, one linked to old emergency speakers in the service corridors. Static hissed for a second, then cleared. Tomarel, she said. This is Sela at Medical Post Delta. If you can hear me, answer. A few long heartbeats later, a young voice came through, thin with distance and fear. I hear you, Toma said. We're in a narrow hall. Feels like the walls want to breathe. That's just a ring reminding you it's alive, Sela said. Who's with you? For kids, Toma said. One's crying. I told them that's good. Means there's still air. You told them right, she said. Listen, Rian is moving toward you. Through an old maintenance trunk, he's going to find another way to you. You're going to do exactly what he says when he gets there. Understood? Toma took a shaky breath. Understood. The tunnel around Rian shuddered, gently as a new load settled into the ring's frame. Dust fell in thin streams. From the seams above him. How close? He asked. Another 20 meters. Then up, Sela said. There should be a hatch on your left. The old log says it opens into a cross-tie, right? Above 12.4. If the old log is wrong, he said, then you complain to the archivist after you survive, she said. He smelled insulation and cold metal and the faint, stale tang of air that had not seen many lungs. He pushed forward until a vertical shaft opened beside, with a narrow ladder and a hand crank lock at the top. Found it? He said. He climbed. His shoulders brushed both sides of the shaft. By the time he reached the top, his breathing had gone raspier. Hold, Sela said. Heart is trying to escape. Tell it the exits are blocked, he said. It can complain later. The hatch at the top was mechanical like the other one, but this one had a dead screen bolted to it. A forgotten upgrade attempt left half finished. He put his ear to the cold metal. He thought he heard something, a faint, high sound that might have been a child crying through layers of steel. He set his jaw and spun the wheel. It resisted, then shuddered, then moved in reluctant inches. Central is trying to lock that segment, Sela warned. I'm seeing new commands, pushing into your area. Kale, they're about to freeze that crosstie. They can try, he said. A dead control box beside the hatch blinked to life for the first time in years. Red text scrolled across its tiny display. Remote lockdown requested, awaiting confirmation. Rian slid a small panel aside and exposed the manual override port beneath. It was an old design, one he had not seen since Hellion days. He dug into a pocket on his belt and pulled out a stubby connector and a compact battery clip, the kind veterans kept long after the service forgot it had ever issued them. Kale, Sela said slowly. What are you doing? Exactly what you think, he said. Some of us kept our toys. He jammed the connector into the port, snapped the battery on, and waited. The box flickered, confused by the sudden rush of power and the unauthorized handshake. For a moment, the text blurred into nonsense. Then, a smaller line appeared beneath it. Local manual control, granted. Rian flipped the mechanical lock with new leverage. The hatch popped a few centimeters, just enough to let the smell of thinner, colder air flood in. He pushed it open and pulled himself up into the crosstie. The space was cramped, a narrow bridge of metal with grated flooring running across the top of the service corridor below. Through gaps in the grating, he could see shapes moving, 5 bodies huddled against one wall. Toma, he called. His voice dropped straight down into the corridor. Toma jerked his head up. Rian, nice place. You picked? Rian said. Stay where you are. I'm going to give you a line. He anchored the rappel line R42 to a solid crossbeam, tugged it hard twice to make sure it held, and threw the coil down through the grate, grazing the far wall. Toma, take it, Rian said. The boy grabbed with both hands. His fingers shook. How bad is it in there? Rian asked. Some panels cracked. Toma said. Floor feels like it moves when the kids breathe. One of the walls has a long crease in it. Okay, Rian said. Here's what happens next. You and the kids are going to move one at a time under me. You keep your eyes on my hand, not on the floor, not on the ceiling. You'll breathe slow. If you feel the world tilt, you bend, you don't lock. Your legs, what if I fall? One of the children whispered. You won't, Rian said, because Toma won't let you. And if you're still scared, good. Fear means you understand this matters. Courage is not the absence of fear. It's doing the right thing while you are afraid. He let the words hang there, simple and solid as the rope. On the control level, Holt Garin watched pressure graphs dance. He watched bulkhead status lights stabilize green, one after another. Only this damaged sliver around. 12-4 still flashed amber and red. Lock that segment, he told the system's tech. We can't leave any arteries open near that fracture. The tech frowned at her screen. Local manual interference. In that tie, she said, something just stole the lock. Channel, then override it, Holt said. Root around. We don't have time for cowboys right now. At Medical Post Delta 12, Silas' console rang a soft, ugly tone. She pulled a simulation window wider. Kale, she said, Central is pushing a full lockdown on your crosstie. If they close the last set of bulkheads with current flow, you get a pressure spike in the maintenance ribs. It will bounce into 11. They mismodeled the ductwork. Can you tell them that? Rian asked. I already tried, she said. Holt isn't listening. He thinks I'm outside my lane. Then talk to someone who owns the whole ring, Rian said. Sela clenched her jaw. Her fingers raced. Over the console, there were channels she wasn't supposed to abuse, lines meant for board members and senior engineers. Today, rules felt thinner than the air. She pulled up the emergency contact net for the Asterix Central Operations Board, tagged the simulation results with her full credentials, and shoved the whole package some higher level with a priority flag of displays reserved for off-station collisions. Men and women in more expensive clothes than hers saw the same numbers Holt saw plus the models he had chosen to ignore. On deck 12, Rian lowered his hand, palm open. First kid, he said. Hands on the rope. Toma, you go behind them, one arm around the line, one around their chest. You are their wall. A small girl stepped forward, legs trembling. She grabbed the rope. I'm scared, she whispered. Good, Rian said gently. Means you'll listen. Eyes up. Look at my hand. One step. Now another, above. The cross-tie vibrated as the ring groaned. He kept his hand steady. Her eyes locked on it like it was the only steady thing left in the universe. They moved. The floor, under her feet, flexed once as the structure shifted, but Toma's arm kept her centered. He took the tilt into his own. Knees, just like on the drills. Almost there, Rian said. Just 2 more steps. She took them. Toma eased her into the space directly under the hatch. Rian reached down through the grate, caught under the arms, and hauled her up with a grunt. He set her behind him on the cross-tie, pressing her small body against the solid curve of the inner wall. Sit, he said. Hold this rail. Don't move unless I tell you. He leaned back over the grate. Next, he said. Below, Toma exhaled hard. Sweat ran down his neck inside the hood. We can do this, he told the next child. If you fall, you've crashed into me first, and I am very annoying too. Knock over at one, a weak laugh. Sometimes, that was enough to get legs moving. On the control level, Holt's tech raised her head. Sir, she said. We just got a board level hold on. The lockdown sequence for Sector D. Temporary suspension. 2-minute review. Who authorized that? Holt demanded. Operations board. Chair, she said. Looks like someone sent them. New Sims Holt's jaw clenched. 2 minutes is a lifetime. In a breach, he said. On deck 12, Rian agreed though, for a different reason. 2 minutes was enough. They moved the children one by one. Each crossing felt slower than the one before. Each time the deck creaked, Rian expected the corridor below to buckle, the cross-tie to shear, the rope to jerk out of his hands. It didn't. The ring complained, but it held. Toma crossed last. He clipped the rope to his own harness, wrapped one arm around it, and kept the other pressed against his chest, where his heart hammered against his ribs. Eyes up, Rian said. Easy for you too, say, Toma muttered. Not really, Rian said. Step, he watched. The boy's feet, they landed wide, knees soft, exactly the way he had taught him. Halfway across, the whole structure shivered with a deep, low groan. The fracture overhead shed another dusting of frost and glittering shards. Toma flinched, but he did not stop. He kept his eyes pinned to Rian's hand. One more, Rian said, then you get to yell at me for making you practice falls. Toma took the last step. Rian grabbed his arm, swung him up through the hatch, and slammed the hatch shut behind them. The moment the latch sealed, a distant clank echoed through the metal. The bulkheads that had been waiting to slam closed finally received their permission. Locks engaged farther down the line, sealing empty air behind where they had just been. Silence flooded, the cross-tie again. Rian sat back hard. Against the wall, the children huddled around him, small bodies radiating heat and shock. Toma lay on his back, staring at the low ceiling, chest heaving. On his wristband, the timer seal I had covertly started ticked over. 2 minutes had passed. For Rian Kale, they had felt like an entire second life crammed into one long breath. 3 days after the breach, Deck 12 was still silent. From the outside, the curve of Asterix habitat ring looked unchanged. The scars were on the inside. A circle of bulkheads stayed sealed. Status lights around the segment pulsed, a steady amber, like a warning heartbeat. Internal bulletins called it a localized incident. The phrasing was careful. Short. It made the event sound smaller, like a glitch. like something that had already been handled. The people who had been there knew better. Rian Kale lay on a medcot in medical post Delta 12, staring at the ceiling. Someone had cleaned the blood from his palms and wrapped his hands in thin bandage mesh. Bruises patterned his ribs where the gate had slammed down and the cross tie had bucked. His chest ached. With every breath, he welcomed the pain. It was proof that breath still existed to hurt. On the cot opposite him, Tom Morell sat propped up against a sloped pillow who'd folded neatly beside him. A line of adhesive ran along his hairline, where a flying shard had grazed him. His eyes looked older in a way that had nothing to do with years. "You keep doing that," Thomas said. "Doing what?" Rian asked. "Counting the ceiling bolts," Thomas said. "You get to 6, then you start." Over Rian blinked, then focused. He had, without thinking, been tracking each bolt along the nearest seam and matching it to a rhythm that only existed in his memory. "Habit," he said. "Sometimes counting is how you wait without going crazy." Thomas studied him for a moment. "I didn't hate the drills," he said quietly. "Not really. I said I did." "You were supposed to say you did," Rian replied. "Means you still wanted to live in a world that didn't need them." The door to the medbay slid open. Sila Marin stepped in, a slate tucked under one arm, a cup of something hot in the other hand. "You two look less dead," she said. "Progress. Define less," Rian said. Sila handed the cup to Toma first. He cupped it with both hands like it might run away. "It's mostly electrolytes and lies about taste," she said. "Drink," he obeyed. After a few gulps, some color crept back into his face. Silas set the slate down. Between the two cots, the screen showed the internal newsfeed of Astro. Headlines scrolled past in tight, sanitized language. "Localized deck incident contained ring structure, remains." Stable review panel convened. "They're calling it small," Thomas said. "They always call it small if the ring doesn't fall apart," Sila replied. "What they don't mention is how close we came to a different headline." She tapped the slate. Another window slid into view, this one showing a procession of messages, comments, and data packets bouncing through the internal net. "Those are the sims you sent," Rian said. "And your variance logs," Sila said. "And Vigilte's original filters. And the first draft of Holt's orders. They're in the board's lap now. They can't pretend not to see them." Toma frowned. "I thought Central controlled what went into the feed," he said. "They do," Sila said, "until someone remembers. The system is made of people. Turns out people leak." She met Rian's gaze. "I tagged your name where it mattered. I didn't ask first." "I'll apologize when you're angrier and less tired," Rian snorted, "as long as you spelled it right." He looked at the scrolling data for a moment. He saw his own notes, the little increments of variance he had written down night after night, woven into graphs and simulations far more complex than anything he would have built. "What about casualties?" he asked. The question sat like a stone between them. Sila held his eyes. "Some," she said. "Less than they projected when they closed the first model. More than 0. Mostly cuts, bruises, dislocated joints from the rush. 2 serious decompression injuries. One of them is still in intensive care, but we did not lose a section of the ring. We did not lose 11 or 13, and the kids," Toma asked. All of them, Sila said. "You got them out of the corridor before it shifted." One of them told a nurse. "You yelled at fear until it listened." Toma flushed. "I was mostly yelling at myself," he said. "Doesn't matter who hears it," Sila said. "Sometimes fear needs a target that sounds like it knows what it's doing." Time moved strangely in the days that followed. Officially turned to routine. Unofficially, something had cracked that could not be patched with sealant and new plating. The hearing convened 5 days after the breach. They held it in a chamber 3 decks above the central axis of room with a view of Githrin 4, as if the gas giant could serve as a reminder of how small their arguments were. Members of the Asterix operations board sat behind a curved table. Screens behind them showed frozen frames from Deck 12's, cameras, the fracture line, the falling shards, the jammed gate. Rian stood at a podium with a simple mic. He wore a clean station jumpsuit. The bandages on his hands were thinner now, but still visible. He did not like rooms like this. He preferred places where movement meant survival instead of gestures. but he had been asked to speak, and some battles he did not get to avoid. And then Gate Kilo 3 came down, he said. I held it as long as I could. Not because I thought I could stop it. Just long enough to see Toma get the children. Through the service door, a board member leaned forward. You chose to remain on the breach side of the gate, she said. Why? Because someone needed to. Be the last one out, Rian said simply. Drills do not mean much if the person who taught them runs first. Soft murmurs rippled across the room. Another board member cleared his throat. Your logs show that you had been tracking structural variants on Deck 12 for some time, he said. You filed several reports. Central most often marked them. Minor, Rian repeated. Yes. Small numbers. Tiny changes, that's how everything breaks. One small piece at a time. He did not raise his voice. He let the words land quietly, as if they were weight instead of sound. My point is not that VIGILT failed. The AI did what it was trained to do. It smoothed noise. It followed thresholds. It trusted global patterns over local discomfort, and you did not. The board member asked. I trusted both, Rian said. I watched the numbers. I listened to the deck. When the two stopped matching each other, I got worried. He lifted his bandaged hand slightly. Hillian taught us that, no, sensor sees everything, he said. That's why you drill. That's why you walk the floor. That's why you teach kids to fall before the world. Tilts for real. Later, Holt Garen took the same podium. He looked sharper than Rian uniform. Perfect eyes, bright with forced composure. Containment protocols exist for a reason, Holt said. We measure risk in more than individual lives. We look at system stability. I made the only call that kept this station from afar. Larger disaster. Video of the models appeared behind him. Red arcs, failure cascades, thousands of projected deaths. He tapped the screen. With incomplete information and limited time, Holt said, no one could have done better. We still have a ring to argue in because the protocols worked. A board member raised an eyebrow. And the decision to cut maintenance cycles on Deck 12, she asked, was that a protocol? 2. Holt hesitated. The data showed low risk, he said. Resource allocation demanded, prioritizing high-yield decks. Commercial tiers generate the credit that keeps us spinning. And the people who live and run and laugh on 12, she said. What do they generate? Holt opened his mouth. Closed it again. Silas Sims appeared on the secondary screen. They showed an alternate choice. Smaller cuts in 3 different areas, including minor lighting upgrades, leaving structural checks intact. In those models, the fracture still appeared, but earlier variance flags triggered inspection and shut down the deck before peak occupancy. Casualties dropped to near 0. The numbers you saw were not the only numbers, another board member said. You chose which ones to trust. By the time the hearing ended, no one left the room thinking Deck 12 was a minor anything. The board's official findings came a week later. They did not strip Holt of his position. Asterix was not that simple. They did, however, remove his sole authority over emergency lockdown decisions and require shared sign-off from a panel that now included structural engineers, they also did something and a representative from the residential tiers. They reclassified Deck 12. No longer a secondary recreational deck, it became a community resilience corridor. It sounded like bureaucratic fluff on the announcement. In practice, it meant 2 things: money for maintenance and authorization for something new. The first classes met 6 weeks after the breach, in a temporary training space 3 decks away, while repairs continued. The air there smelled of cleaning solvent and new padding. Lines were taped on the floor too. Mark fall zones and safe paths. Rian stood off to the side at first, arms folded, watching. He had agreed to help design the program. He had not agreed yet to be its face. In the center of the room, a small group of residents practiced donning pressure hoods. They were a mixed bunch: a retiree from hydroponics, a dock loader, a woman who ran a cafe, 2 teenagers who had not stopped vibrating since they walked in. Tom Morell stood in front of them, hood in his hands. His hair had grown in around the scar. He wore a simple instructor vest over his jumpsuit. You have 3 seconds, he said. That's how long it takes for panic to decide what kind of day you are going to have. A nervous laugh rippled through the group. Toma pulled the hood over his head in one smooth motion, twisted the ring, and tapped the seal. 1, he said. 2, 3. That's it. After that, you're not thinking about your hands anymore. They already did their job. He looked over at Rian, just for a heartbeat. Rian gave him the smallest nod he could manage without anyone else noticing. An older man raised his hand. What if my hands shake? He asked. They will, Toma said. Mine did. They probably still will next time. Courage doesn't make the shaking stop. It just means you do the right thing while you're shaking. The words hung in the air. A few people glanced at each other, and something eased in their shoulders. They moved on to drills, walking low along a taped wall, pausing at doors, pivoting around imaginary debris. They laughed when they stumbled. They cursed quietly. When they got it wrong, Rian listened to the sound of their feet. It reminded him of Deck 12, of the days before the fracture, of nights when the only thing moving had been his own shadow. Repairs finished 2 months after the breach. The day they reopened Deck 12, the overhead lights came up in a new spectrum, brighter and cleaner. Fresh plating glowed along the ribs. Sensors took readings with an almost suspicious eagerness. There were still scars, if he knew where to look. A faint change in color where panels had been replaced. Hairline seams where welders had stitched the ring back together. Rian stood near the inner railing, hands bare. The LA started the bandage lines, barely white against his skin. He felt the deck under his boots. The vibration had changed again. It felt younger. Footsteps approached from behind. Feels different, Thomas said. New metal, Rian said. New stress patterns. It will settle. Children ran past him laughing, racing to see who could make it to the far curve first. Each of them wore a bright band on one wrist, the mark of someone who had completed the first set of civilian drills. They asked if I wanted to help teach the second cycle, Thomas said. Not just the kids, the adults too. What did you tell them? Rian asked. That I'd rather just sit on a deck that never cracks again, Thomas said. Then I remembered that's not how any of this works. He exhaled slowly. I said yes, he finished. Rian watched the runners. Their footsteps sent small pulses through the structure, not heavy enough to hurt anything, just enough to remind the metal that it held living weight. For a long time, he said, I thought the only place I made sense was in old stories about bad landings and broken beams. And now, Toma asked. Rian rested his palm on the newly repaired wall. The metal was warm from the light, from the people. Now, he said, this feels like somewhere I belong that isn't trying to kill me first. Above them, Gether and Four turned, storms curling inside the ring. Life went on, running, laughing, complaining about drills, learning how to fall and how to get up again. The universe would not stop throwing debris. Systems would always be tempted to smooth, uncomfortable data. Structure would always carry stress in places no one saw at first. But somewhere on Deck 12, a man who had spent most of his life in war could stand still, listen to the faint, steady hum of metal and voices, and believe that a peaceful day could still prepare people for the one moment by teaching them quietly and stubbornly how to stand. And as the lights settled across the newly rebuilt curve of Deck 12, Rian let himself breathe without waiting for the next alarm. He had spent years believing that survival was the only kind of victory. But here, in the steady hum of a ring full of people learning to live and prepare together, he finally understood something quieter, something stronger. Peace was not the absence of danger. It was the choice to stand for one another before the danger arrived. And for the first time in a long time, he felt ready for whatever tomorrow brought. If this story moved you, take a moment to like the video, share it with someone who loves sci-fi, and subscribe to the channel so you never miss the next journey.